Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, well, obviously, the FIFA World Cup draw and all that entails there. Let's see, what else? Crypto King, Chicharito, referees, Barca, college soccer, Weston, Mosse's brand, Logan's Run, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, April 4th in the year 2022?
I am doing well, although based on your tweets last night, it sounds like we reversed roles this week because I am not a big Grammys guy. I did not watch 1 second of the ceremony, and it seemed like you were all over it, so I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts.
So I purposely tuned into the Grammy Awards last night because I wanted to at least try to educate myself. I fully admit that, first off, it's not an award show that is in any way catered towards my musical tastes. And I'm not just talking about, my antiquated 80s focus. I'm talking much more about even just rock in general, which does not often have a place other than the Foo Fighters, rest in peace, Taylor Hawkins. But I wanted to try to see what was going on and what the latest stuff is, what the kids are singing or are listening to nowadays. And it was interesting. There were some good performances and there were some meh performances. There seems to be this thing now where you start everything with a really slow piano vocal thing and then kick into the big thing, kind of to show your breadth and your ability to do a lot of different things. I thought the Lady Gaga performance for me was really, really good. And then when Lenny Kravitz actually came and played a guitar and there was, some rockage going on stage, I thought that fundamentally changed the dynamic of it. But, listen, I am comparing it to when it was everything of a night for me back in the day where I hung on every word and every note and every performer and every award just to see the performers, and all that was huge. And the world has changed a whole lot since then. Obviously, award shows have changed a whole lot since then. But it wasn't. I wasn't rolling my eyes in the way that I thought I would at different times. So yeah, I gave it a thumbs up, if you will. It got me through a few hours of the evening.
Yeah, I say we reverse roles because the previous week it was the Oscars, which I was much more into than you. So this week it was the Grammys. Any Will Smith-like incident last night? Was there anything that went haywire?
See, this is the problem now. All right, we have kind of gone to the mount and to the extreme, and anything less than walking on stage and slapping in this case, it would be a fellow musician, is kind of a ho-hum type of show. So thank you, Will Smith, for completely ruining the entire award show format. Nothing really exciting. They're musicians, so they're kind of wacky to begin with, and whether it's the way that they present themselves, their aesthetic, but yeah, nothing crazy like that happened. But at least it was live. I remember tuning in a little bit last year and the last couple of years that have been, while they've been live, with COVID and everything. This actually was happening in front of thousands of people. And I enjoyed the way they went outside in Vegas and showed some lesser known groups performing, whether it was, a gospel group or a bluegrass group and stuff like that. So that was kind of interesting to see those. They kind of played us out from commercial and then back in from commercial, not getting a full performance, but still giving us a taste of all the music that is involved when it comes to something like that. Did you watch anything, my friend?
I'm watching lots right now, but the one thing I'm going to mention is Atlanta, which I'm so happy to have this show back. And I thought this last episode was an all-timer, them at this party at this guy Fernando's house. If you don't watch the show, me describing the plot wouldn't make any sense to you, but just a terrific episode and what is just a great show. So I'm very happy to have it back in my life.
And this is a comedy, right? Would you describe it as that?
Yeah, something of a dark comedy.
Okay, dark comedy, and it's been around for a while, even though they've taken whatever a hiatus or something like that. Now it's back with episodes, and so everybody's gaga over that.
Correct. And, we're just talking about the Grammys. There's a tie-in to the music industry because Donald Glover, is obviously
Bambino, right? Isn't that his name?
Luis Aguilar, jump in here.
Childish Gambino. There we go.
Yeah.
Luis is also a big fan, evidently, of Atlanta. I might have to check it out. It sounds good. You guys have both, given it, great praise. So maybe I'll have to check it out. Although I know it's not done yet, and so I don't want to violate my principles there. Anything else you're watching?
Yeah, lots. I mean, still with Winning Time, this show about the Lakers, which I'm enjoying. Killing Eve, still going. My Brilliant Friend. So yeah, I've got quite a bit going right now. I did watch this Netflix true crime documentary on this famous bank robbery in Brazil in a city called Fortaleza, which, because it was Brazil, it piqued my interest. I must say, I thought it was fairly disappointing, actually. I don't know how you felt about it.
I did not watch that yet. I did see it there, up there. So now that you've poo-pooed it, I'm definitely watching it. I glossed over that one. There was another one I didn't even have in my list of things that I did watch because it wasn't multiple episodes. Was about this Colombian singer, and anyway, maybe I'll talk about that next week. This week, though, let's see what I watched. Let's see. Oh, Ben-Hur. You've watched Ben-Hur before?
Classic,
right? Charlton Heston from 1959, I think. Oof. Let's see what else. And it holds up. It still holds up. Let's see. Logan's Run. You ever see that?
No.
Logan's Run is with Michael York, and it's 1976-ish. And it still holds up too. It's about this society that exists after the world's gone to hell in a handbasket. So it's one of those apocalyptic type of things, right? And the premise is that you can only live to 30. And then you die, or you have this carousel that they call where you could possibly live on. We come to find out you don't really live on. So you're really only living to 30. And so they, not hijinks ensue, but you get the gist there. That does not necessarily hold up from a sci-fi perspective, but I think the story in and of itself is ripe for a remake. They might have remade it. I don't know. Okay, let's see what else. Still dipping back. Moscow on the Hudson. You ever heard about this one?
Boy, what's with old movies this week?
I don't know. I don't know why. There's some nostalgia going on.
That's Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, 1984. He is a Russian who defects in Bloomingdale's in New York City. Hijinks do ensue in terms of fish out of water and how he adapts. But there's some really, really, I think for the most part, it holds up. There's some great scenes, including a scene in a diner that I hadn't remembered that was much more powerful than I thought it was going to be, with a bunch of people in a diner that don't necessarily all know each other, sharing the collective experience and the pride and the joy at coming to the U.S. Without losing who they are, but being together. Anyway, I thought it was actually timely. And then go ahead.
I thought that was going to be the last thing you were going to say, and this would segue us nicely into talking about the World Cup draw. Speaking of Robin Williams, Grant Wall posted this hilarious clip ahead of this World Cup draw of the 94 one, and Robin Williams' involvement in that ceremony.
Blatter. Oh, he had a field day with Joseph Blatter. Oh my goodness. I mean, he's zeroed in right from the moment it started on Blatter's last name, and he would not let up. It was brutal. From a Blatter perspective, it was great from a Robin Williams perspective. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then finally, our friend Stu Holden. He's a big crypto guy. So there's a documentary on Netflix called "Trust No One: A Hunt for the Crypto King," which was this young entrepreneur that started a crypto site, and he ended up dying. But he died without telling anybody the codes in order to get the money. So anyway, it's an interesting story about crypto if you're into crypto. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
Ready to light this candle?
Let's do it.
All right, we're going to jump right into it because obviously we had a huge week and an important week when it comes to what our world looks like and what our soccer world looks like going forward. The FIFA draw. How do you want to dive into this, Mosse? Because there's so much there.
I figured we would address the U.S. group first and then circle back and do all the other ones. How's that?
Okay, that sounds good. So for anybody that doesn't know, Group B, U.S., England, Iran, United States, and then one of either Ukraine, Scotland, or Wales, because they still have the playoffs going over there. And, we know that we're in strange and interesting times here. And so initial thoughts when this happened, on the set, I was with Marisa Dew and I was with Rob Stone. I think all of us at the moment that this all played out were cautiously optimistic, and maybe even just optimistic. Nothing scares me about this group, and that by no means that we can't lose to every one of these teams. But there is a pathway out with this particular U.S. team. I had talked about beforehand how I actually would rather face England than host Qatar, and they fell into our laps. So initial reaction for me, fine. I'm happy with this group. I'm excited about this group. It's a competitive group. We'll get into whether there's a group of death or not, but I see multiple pathways out for the United States, regardless of who those three between Ukraine, Scotland, and Wales. We'll get into that in a second. But I guess initial thoughts when the group came out.
Yeah, given the fact that the U.S. was in pot 2 and seeing the way the pots were laid out, I don't think there was a possibility for a nightmarish draw for the U.S. Even the worst case scenarios that people were coming up with, I would look at and say, yeah, that's tough, but I've seen worse. And so the group they ended up with, I would say it's a fairly good draw, particularly when you consider the fact that they are crisscrossed with the Qatar group for the round of 16. So overall, I would term it a pretty good day for the U.S. I do have a lot of thoughts about the reaction that fans had to the U.S. group, but we can get to that in a sec.
When I came on air and I was talking, I mean, we had talked about this before, about how, because conventional wisdom tells you want Qatar in a situation like this, a team that's never been to a World Cup, a team that is... It's not an easy team, but it's a team that a lot of people would want to play. And my reasoning was, having been through it as a host nation, and as a host nation that people didn't give a lot of chances of being successful, I think that is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so my argument was, while England is a very, very good team, the U.S. against a team like England coming out of Group A or Pot A, I actually favor the U.S. because they get put in that underdog role, which is a whole lot more comfortable with kind of nothing to lose, as opposed to a Qatar where, you have the country behind you. We've seen Qatar last year in the Gold Cup. It's a very good team. It's been around the world gaining experience, and there's a difficulty and a challenge associated with playing a host nation and playing a host nation like Qatar that I just thought it was better to get somebody else. Did you buy that or not?
Well, you could argue that not getting Qatar from pot 1 allowed for the possibility of getting an Asian team from one of the other pots, and thus could make it an easier group to get out of. So when you start playing around with the different combinations, I don't think your argument that you put forth on our show was that ridiculous. I do, we'll talk about Group A in a second, but we watched Qatar at the Gold Cup. They looked frisky. I talked myself into them possibly being a dangerous team at this World Cup. The more I've watched of them, we also did them in the Arab Cup. I don't know. I've sort of come around to the fact that this is a South Africa 2010 situation, a host nation that's not going to be much of a factor. So we disagree a little bit on them, but for the most part, I share your general assessment of the U.S. group. So I don't think we're parting ways that much.
All right, so let's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You got something to say.
I mean, can we get into the reaction to the U.S. group, because I found that fascinating.
We can.
Look, the nature of these World Cup draws is that people judge other teams superficially, and then they get mad when others judge their team superficially. And it was rather amusing to see US fans on Twitter bristle at the disrespect being shown by the English, but then in the same breath, talk about how the US is definitely going to beat Iran and whoever this other European team is. I'd love to know how many Iran games any of these US fans on Twitter have watched in the last 4 years, or how many players they can name on this team. So I thought that was rather amusing. And also, look, I know it's fun to try to make this a uniquely English thing, the arrogance, and to be, posting these newspaper headlines, Yankee Doodle Dandy, et cetera. To be fair, I searched the newspapers of all the top countries in the morning of the draw. All of them were hoping to get the U.S. out of pot 2. When they were doing their best and worst case scenarios, the same way you did for the U.S. on our show, in the best case scenario, they all had the U.S. out of pot 2. So I think U.S. fans need to understand this notion that the U.S. has a really good team. It's sort of a hypothetical at this point. Now, it's not completely their fault. It has a lot to do with COVID and the advent of the Nations League and the way the regions have become walled off from each other. They really haven't had a chance to prove themselves against teams from other regions. And even within a CONCACAF context, the nature of qualifying and all the injuries they had and how little time all their best players spent on the field together, we all think there's a really good team in there somewhere, but we haven't really seen it. And you have to understand, from these other countries' point of view, they see a country that didn't qualify for the last World Cup, that just finished third in CONCACAF qualifying this time around, dropping points against the likes of El Salvador and Jamaica and Panama and Costa Rica. So it's going to take more than having a few Champions League players to really earn the top team's respect and have them be fearful of facing the U.S. So I don't think England's reaction to this draw was that sort of out of bounds. And so I did find it interesting that U.S. fans felt so insulted by the way the English reacted to this draw.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been around for any length of time, it should be part and parcel. I mean, I was expecting it. I would expect nothing less from England, and bring it on. That's great. I love it. The more of this, the better. Okay. The more that they pound their chest, and the more that they feel like this is easy, the better it is for this US team, the better it is for this group. And look, and to your point, yeah, while I love to needle and poke the English, and believe me, this gives me incredible opportunities and fodder going forward. This is what they are, especially relative to the U.S. And when this came out, I told you that this is salivating for so many reasons, on and off the field. By the way, all of the connections that we have, all of the history that we have, all of the the snobbery, and to your point, yes, the snobbery exists in different forms on both sides, and it's all relative to who you're talking about and who the perception is that's above you, or who the perception is that is below you, and so it trickles up, it trickles down. I totally understand that, and it's only going to increase, which is why there is that opportunity out there for the U.S. in this World Cup and in this group to do well against England. And listen, there are going to be quality other games that the U.S. is going to face and could potentially lose. So putting all of our focus and all of our eggs into that England basket, while from an American perspective, it would feel great. And I've already talked to people who are saying, can you imagine if the U.S. beats England at the World Cup? Well, yes, I can imagine that happening, especially given our history and our success in the World Cup against England. But it does us no good to do well against England if we're not also, if we don't have the ability also to get the job done against Iran or one of those three teams, whoever it ends up being.
And I know Derek Ray was taking exception to how dismissive U.S. fans were of Scotland if it ended up being them in that group. And I've been trying to think about those three European teams. It's going to be either Wales, Scotland, or Ukraine, and which one the U.S. would rather have. I don't know. I mean, with Wales, you're dealing with the Gareth Bale factor and the fact that whenever that guy puts on a Wales shirt, he still plays like one of the best players in the world and can win a match by himself. Ukraine, in addition to the karma that the team would obviously have at their backs at a World Cup, it's also a talented team. They have some good players. Malinovsky, the midfielder, plays for Atalanta. Yarmchuk, the striker, scoring goals for Benfica. Yarmolenko, Zinchenko. So it's not just that the sort of external variables. It's also a pretty good team. And then you have Scotland in there, which my apologies to Derek Ray, but I would probably make them the third best team out of those three. So I think if you're a U.S. fan, you probably hope it's them. But I don't know. It's not, the gaps aren't that big. So I think either way, it's sort of a game that the U.S. feels like they could win, but it's tricky, and they could lose also. It's sort of kind of that down the middle kind of thing.
Well, so I'm going to talk about Iran in a second here, but, going to the conversation about Ukraine, on air the other day, Rob Stone was talking about how, from a sentimentality perspective and a world perspective, a world view, the narrative and the feel good moment or possibility and potential for feel good moment if and when Ukraine qualifies, and then for the U.S. and everybody else in this group to face Ukraine at a World Cup. And I turned to him, I said, but not at the expense of the U.S. I mean, so from a competitive standpoint, I don't want to play the Ukraine. I don't want to play a team that is the world's favorite right now, that is the world's darling right now. Well, most of the world, almost the entire world. I don't want to play that. This is purely from a competitive standpoint. Yes, the human in me, and there is a human in me, recognizes how wonderful that would be in that moment and that platform. But again, not at the expense of the U.S. And it's difficult enough in a World Cup, not having the entire world against you. But it does shape up possibly for an incredibly interesting group from a geopolitical standpoint, all those different things where you have obviously the United States and Iran, and if Ukraine were to come through, and then obviously England, and then Iran, it's a throwback. And there is a real, a 98 vibe going on here with this group. And for those that don't know, the U.S. played in 1998 in the World Cup. Yours truly was a part of that incredible failure, the biggest failure at a men's World Cup ever. And we completely bombed out, including losing to Iran. And that game took on a whole nother dimension, given our history, given the politics and all those different things, as this one will undoubtedly do also. So there's again, mouth-watering. It doesn't even come close to describing it. There's so many different stories on and off the field. There's so much different history. And, ultimately from a competitive standpoint, I still think from a U.S. perspective, while we have looked at this team, absolutely, you're correct, over the last couple of years in a very insulated and isolated type of view, I still think that we're right and fair to be bullish about this team going into this World Cup and going into this group.
Iran have 2 World Cup wins all time. One was against Morocco in 2018, and the other was that 98 victory over the U.S. And they do have a striker, Sardar Azmoun, who's nicknamed the Iranian Messi. So We'll have some fun with that.
Everybody's got a Messi at some point, right? I mean...
So interesting group, and we've got 7 more months to chew on it. But we'll see how the U.S. does. And
just to clean some stuff up. So when does those games are in June, right? The playoff games.
Correct. Yeah, Scotland will play Ukraine, and then the winner of that will be away to Wales, and then that'll spit out a European team, and then we have 2 other berths still up for grabs, which as we go along with the different groups, I'll point those out when we come up on them.
And I want to circle just back around to, a big picture from this draw day, and then let's get to the other groups here. But the reaction from, I guess what we call the mainstream media and sports media out there was amazing it shouldn't be amazing because I've been around for a long time, but it still is always amazing to me how many people come out of the woodwork when something like this happens. And I thought it was great, but I think it's an indication that there's going to be a lot of people that come into the tent, and we have an opportunity once again to convert them, if you will. What else, Mosse? What group do you want to go to first?
Why don't we go to Group A?
Okay.
FIFA threw us a bit of a curveball. The first game of the tournament will actually be Senegal, Netherlands, not Qatar, Ecuador. That's a change. It's usually the host nation recently that's played in the opening game. Now, Senegal, Netherlands, certainly a good game, but did I see some nut on Twitter this weekend call that the best game of the group stage?
Oh, you want to get into it, don't you? You want to get into it, don't you, buddy?
Yeah. So let's have some fun with this. So, Fox Sports Digital, they've been so good about promoting me, and they gave me a cool opportunity on Friday. They said, after the World Cup draw, why don't you write an article on the 10 must-see games of the group stage? So I picked out 10 games. I wrote about them, but I didn't put them in any particular order. I just went down the list of the groups and picked out 10 games I liked and sent it in that way. And the way the piece was edited and the way they tweeted it out, they framed it as if it was a ranking of the 10 games. So on Saturday, I started getting all these angry tweets. I can't believe you ranked this game above that one. And so we eventually got it sorted and it was fine. And the story had a happy ending. But I know, were getting a real kick out of this whole situation on Saturday.
Dude, listen. All right. You want to come into my world? Fine. No problem. Come in. The water's warm. There's plenty of room. I love you. Right. But I mean, almost on a weekly basis, I am asked to rank things and list things out and give my order. And this is number one. And this is grades for the teams and all that kind of stuff. And inevitably, when you do that, all right, you put yourself out there and you come in for all sorts of criticism, legitimate and not. So my point to you was, whether you meant to do it or not, when you go back and do it for the second time, then actually do it and rank them and give me what your number one game is. Because yes, the fact that it came out, when it originally came out, it looked like that you were telling us that it just looked so like snobby.
I know I can be a bit of a hipster, but even I don't think Senegal, Netherlands is a better game than Spain, Germany.
Well, we got it sorted out, and you will continue to provide incredible digital content out there. And we're having fun, and it was not even fixed, but it came out later in a much more acceptable form to you. But I think you did point out a lot of games, and I think what you did was illustrate how hard it is to pick what the best games are out there, and how, in particular, before we get on to the other groups here. And because I think it's going to be a trend as we go through these groups, is the balance in this World Cup in particular. And you've been following World Cups. I think, and we'll continue to talk about this, and maybe our viewers and our listeners have different ideas, but I don't think that there's a group of death per se. And I know we have to define group of death and all that, but I do think that from top to bottom, there's not a team here that thinks, oh, we're screwed. I don't think that there are. And predicting what happens in these groups is very, very difficult. And that's what you want. You want a competitive World Cup. So I just think the balance in the groups, and then the balance in totality of all of these teams, is shaping up for an incredibly competitive World Cup. Does that mean it's the most entertaining World Cup? Who knows? Because sometimes competitive games can be boring. But anyway, okay, so which group we want?
So Group A, we should begin with some sad news here. The Netherlands coach, Louis van Gaal, announced that he has prostate cancer, so we wish him a speedy recovery. Obviously, it's not the most important thing related to that story, but I am curious now to see who's going to coach the Netherlands in this tournament. The Dutch, they missed out on Euro 2016 and the 2018 World Cup. They sort of hit rock bottom as a soccer nation. They're not all the way back. I don't consider this a vintage Netherlands team. I don't think they're top contenders to win the World Cup, but they're a pretty good team. Anytime you've got Virgil van Dijk anchoring that back line with Matthias de Ligt and Nathan Ake, in the midfield, Frankie de Jong, Jorginho Wijnaldum, you've got Denzel Dumfries flying down that right wing. You've got Memphis Depay, Steven Bergwijn, Daniel Malin. So talent all over the field. I think they're the class of this group. So it becomes really a battle for second, which it sounds like you're leaning Qatar, not to put words in your mouth. I'm on the Senegal bandwagon. A lot of people are highlighting them as a dark horse in this tournament, and I'm on that page. I think, to have that spine they have of Mendy in goal and Koulibaly anchoring the back line, Idrissa Gueye in the midfield, Sadio Mane up there, reigning African champions are riding a wave of momentum here. So I would pick them as the second best team in this group. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, notwithstanding what I said about facing Qatar, I don't necessarily think that Qatar comes out of this group. So I'm good with you. But again, here's another situation where you're going to bet against Ecuador. I mean, Ecuador is a good team. And we talked about Qatar here. I do think that Netherlands comes out first. And by the way, this is the group that the U.S., if they were to come out, would play. So it is important, and how it all ends up being. If the U.S., for example, finished second, then in your case, it would be them against the Netherlands, right?
Correct. Yeah. And yeah, on Ecuador, I mean, I'm a little biased as a South American, but yeah, I like this team a lot. Some really good young players, Moises Caicedo, Gonzalo Plata. And if you're looking for a non-CONCACAF team to follow through an MLS lens, this team has a real MLS flavor. You've got Michael Estrada starting games up front, Alan Franco, Arriaga at the back, Diego Palacios, Jose Cifuentes, Jegson Mendes. All those guys are in the mix to make that squad. So we'll see how many are on there. But I'm sure we'll follow this tournament also through sort of an MLS lens. So that's a team to look out for as well.
All right, let's switch over to Group C here. Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Poland. Did Tata and company not get screwed, but this is, another difficult group.
And obviously Tata facing his native country in Argentina. He was the Argentina coach for those heartbreaking Copa America final defeats to Chile in both 15 and 16. We covered the Centenario in 16. And then Argentina finally broke through on our air again last year, beating Brazil at the Maracanã. I'm super high on Argentina. I think they're a major threat to win this tournament. The job that Scaloni's done, it's amazing when you think about it. Scaloni was nothing more than a glorified Dave Sarachan, a guy they put in place after the World Cup as sort of an interim guy until they found the proper manager. And then they couldn't get anybody to take the job. And Scaloni did so well, they left him alone. And all he's done is they're unbeaten in 31 games now and looking like a well-oiled machine. Messi, as you talked about on our show, first time in his career, really, that he's playing better for country rather than club. And he's got such a good supporting cast. You've got Emiliano Martinez in goal, Christian Romero anchoring that back line, that midfield with Rodrigo de Paul and Lo Celso and Paredes. Angel Di Maria kind of reestablishing himself as that sort of Pippin to Messi's Jordan. And then Lautaro Martinez blossoming into a star up there. So Argentina wins this group, and I think they're a threat to go far. I don't know much about Saudi Arabia, so I'm going to stick them fourth, which I admit is a little bit me sort of doing the exact same thing I'm chastising U.S. fans for doing with Iran. So you'd think it'd be Mexico, Poland for second place. And I lean Mexico. Poland, Robert Lewandowski's had a lot to say here about these World Player of the Year awards, and he didn't like that Messi won the Ballon d'Or. But we know he backs it up every week for Bayern Munich, but I'd like to see him have a good tournament here. He didn't score a goal in the last World Cup. Poland, who were a seeded team, crashed out in the group stage. So Robert Lewandowski, if you're going to talk all that smack about how you're the best player in the world and you're better than Messi, et cetera, I'd like to see you do something in this group. But I lean Mexico. I think they'll get it together enough. I know they were disappointing qualifying, but I would lean towards them finishing second.
Yeah, I think in seeing some of the Mexican media, I think their reaction was also relative to the way that they look at the El Tri right now, and it's not very positive coming out of qualifying. And so, but Mexico finds a way. And Tata Martino, as we said last week, he was hired to have this team excel in the World Cup. And I'm with you right there. I think that it's Argentina and Mexico that come out of this group. But again, it's a scrumptious type of setup with all four of these teams. Okay, Group D.
Group D, we have the defending champions, France, Denmark, Tunisia, and then another one of those berths that's still up for grabs. You have the United Arab Emirates playing Australia in an Asian playoff, and then the winner of that will face Peru in an intercontinental playoff. So one of those three teams, UAE, Australia, or Peru, will be in this group along with France, Denmark, and Tunisia.
France, and look, we take it with a grain of salt when it comes to rankings and all that kind of stuff. But France at 3, Denmark at 11, Tunisia at 35. A lot of people, when we talk about, dark horse type of teams are throwing out Denmark. And, in this one, first coming out would be France. I don't think I'm going out on a limb when I'm saying that. And then, it's got to be Denmark.
I agree. Keep in mind, France's group 4 years ago was France, Denmark, Australia, and Peru. So if one of Australia or Peru makes it, it's going to have a real 2018 flavor. France and Denmark are the class of this group. I'm very high on Denmark. They're going to have the feel-good story of the tournament, which is Christian Eriksen. Sure. If he keeps playing well. Very good team, got to the semifinals of the Euros. They waltzed through qualifying. Not just Eriksen, but you've got Andreas Christensen anchoring the back line, is a Chelsea player now. It sounds like he'll be a Barcelona player by the time this World Cup rolls around. That midfield with Højbjerg and Delaney, and you've got Yusuf Poulsen, I know a player you like up there, Kasper Dolberg. So very good team. So yeah, and France, we know the talent is ridiculous. The idea that you could have a squad good enough to win the World Cup already and you add Karim Benzema to it is almost preposterous. But they are dealing with this recent defending champions trend, which is so bizarre. The last 3 and 4 of the last 5 have gone out in the group stage. So we'll see if they can overcome that.
I mean, they might not overcome it and they may lose it, but I don't think it's going to be because they have regressed. I mean, I think by all measures, France has only improved, right? When they get to this World Cup. So they might buck the trend, and they certainly have the talent. And like I said, they certainly haven't gone backwards in terms of the personnel. They've only gotten better, which is scary. Group E.
Group E is Spain, Germany, Japan, and then the last of our berths still to be decided. It'll be either Costa Rica or New Zealand, whoever wins that intercontinental playoff in June. And yet, had I done a ranking of the group stage games, Spain, Germany would have obviously been number one. That's the only group stage game, I would say, between two genuine contenders to win the World Cup. And me saying that obviously means those are the two teams I expect to come out of this group. Spain, it's not the same star power as 2010, but they remain committed to that tiki-taka approach. They've played some lovely stuff under Luis Enrique, and they have a player in Pedri who I think is going to be one of the breakout stars of this tournament, if he's even a breakout player still, because I think anybody that follows the game knows that he's fantastic. Germany, we know they look like a spent force after the Euros, but that really just had to do with Jogi Löw overstaying his welcome. Ever since Hansi Flick came in, it's been a breath of fresh air. They've looked like Germany again. They've ripped through qualifying, and the names still roll off the tongue, and Thomas Muller and Leroy Sané and Serge Gnabry and Kai Havertz, Joshua Kimmich and Goretzka and Gundogan and Neuer and Rudiger and Sula. So absolutely loaded team.
How can you have such little faith in someone like Costa Rica after their history and what they've done before, where they've completely thrown everything out the window in terms of conventional wisdom when they get to a World Cup? And I know that this Costa Rica team is not necessarily what it has been in the past, but they have certainly come on. And by the way, this is just if Costa Rica gets past New Zealand, and then you're just you're dumping on Japan over there. It's just an afterthought. It's
a shame because Japan have been to the knockout stage in 3 of the last 6 World Cups, and they almost beat Belgium in the round of 16 4 years ago. They had a 2-0 lead in the second half, and from a Brazilian perspective, I wish they had, because it would have meant Brazil would have faced Japan and not Belgium in the quarterfinals. That Vertonghen looping header still haunts me. That goal happening right when it did is why Belgium was able to turn that around. They were minutes away from being kind of dead in that match. But nevertheless, now Japan, good team for sure. But man, up against Spain and Germany, that's a tough draw for them. So I stand by my dismissiveness of Costa Rica and Japan.
Well, good. At least you stand by it. Speaking of dismissiveness, our friends from the Great White North, Canada, the soccer gods, they giveth and they taketh away. So welcome back after 36 years to the Men's World Cup. They breezed through qualifying, finishing first in CONCACAF, and for their efforts, they get a group with Belgium, Morocco, and Croatia.
This will be my last reference to this piece I wrote about the best group games, but the part where I got really hipster with it intentionally was the game I picked out of this group was Canada-Morocco rather than Belgium-Croatia. Only because I just love the idea of Alphonso Davies and Achraf Hakimi on the same side of the field, flying past each other the whole game, 2 of the fastest players in the world. But I do think Belgium and Croatia are the class of this group, although I'm going to want to keep an eye on some of these Belgium stars over the next 7 months, because we know Hazard, since going to Real Madrid, his career has fallen off a cliff, and we know some of the issues Lukaku has had at Chelsea. So we talk about this golden generation, but 2 of the 3 standard bearers of it aren't really in great form right now for their clubs. De Bruyne is still going strong with Man City. So,
but you won't use that logic with Messi in Argentina over there.
What do you mean? Oh, with Messi, but I mean, he's shown now that his club form isn't really affecting his national team form. He's played great for Argentina. I haven't seen as much evidence of that with Hazard and Lukaku. Croatia, I don't think are as good as they were 4 years ago, certainly when they made it all the way to the final. Ivan Rakitic has since retired from international duty, but the midfield is still the strength. You've still got Modric and Brozovic and Kovacic, Perisic too, flying down the wings. But I actually do think there's a chance for a surprise in this group. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Belgium or Croatia are that imposing. Belgium, you'd expect to finish first. But that Croatia, that's a soft second team in that group. It would not shock me if a Canada or Morocco sprung a surprise there. What do you think?
That first game, from a Canada perspective, that first game is huge. Obviously, welcome back to the World Cup. and you got to face off against Belgium, one of the elites, despite the fact that Mosse doesn't like them and thinks they all suck. So yeah, I mean, if they were to get something out of that first game against Belgium, and not just points, but kind of prove to everyone that they deserve to be there and they can hang there, then I think they kick on. And if they get blown out by Belgium in that first game, then I think it's going to be a very short and painful stay for Canada in the World Cup. So, yeah, so I definitely have Belgium and Croatia.
Group G.
Your guys. Here we go.
Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon. Let me say this. There's this narrative out there that Brazil gets handed easy World Cup groups. And I think here we go. That's blinding people to the fact that, I'm sorry, this top to bottom, you could make a case, is the strongest group. Our good pal Jason Wormser, who always comes after me about the cupcake groups that Brazil supposedly gets at all these World Cups, he's been rather quiet the last couple of days because I think he's digesting this, and even he's realizing that when you have the number one ranked team in the world, 5-time champions, joined by 2 solid European teams. Switzerland have been to the knockout stages of the last 2 World Cups. They played Brazil to a 1-1 draw in the group stage in 2018. They eliminated France from the Euros last year en route to the quarterfinals, and they just finished atop a qualifying group with Italy. So they've got some pedigree. And Serbia finished atop a qualifying group with Portugal, beating Portugal to clinch a World Cup berth. When you've got guys like Dusan Vlahovic and Dusan Tadic and Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, they've got some real talent there. So those games will not be easy for Brazil at all. They're the favorites to win this group. And then you throw in a frisky African side in Cameroon. So I think top to bottom, this is a very interesting group.
Well, you mentioned it. So Brazil is number 1, Serbia's 25, Switzerland's 14, and Cameroon is 37. So yeah, just from a FIFA ranking perspective, it's pretty close. Man, this one's hard. Yeah, I think your poor little Brazil is going to be just fine. I think they're going to figure out a way to get out of there.
Both Serbia and Switzerland were in Brazil's group in 2018. Like I said, 1-1 draw against Switzerland and a 2-0 win over Serbia. And Cameroon was in Brazil's group in 2014. They played in Brasilia, a match I attended. Brazil won 4-1. Cameroon were so bad that they even Fred scored. But we'll see how it goes when these 2 teams collide at this World Cup.
Just crushing Freggie. Okay, a couple more groups here. What do we at? Sorry, one more group here. Group H, Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay, and South Korea.
This is another candidate for strongest top to bottom. South Korea, do you know this is their 10th straight World Cup appearance? The only countries with longer active streaks are Brazil, Germany, Argentina, and Spain. So South Korea have built up a nice little pedigree here. They got all the way to 4th place in 2002 on home soil when they were managed by our former Fox Sports colleague, Gus Hiddink, although I was scared to bring this up to Goose in 2018, but the officiating they got in their favor in that World Cup was something to behold. And then you've got, my feelings about Portugal. This is one of those classic qualifying is one thing, the World Cup is another, because if this team sort of mentally resets after a disappointing qualifying campaign, they could be scary. I mean, the talent, you've got Ronaldo trying to become the first player to score in 5 different World Cups, first men's player. And the supporting cast is going to be surrounded with João Felix, Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, Diogo Jota, Ruben Dias, João Cancelo. So I think Portugal, just on talent alone, are one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the tournament. And then you've got Uruguay, who ever since they brought in Diego Alonso, have turned things around. They won their last 4 qualifiers. They've got a nice little blend of youth and experience there, with guys like Suarez, Cavani, and Godin are still around, but now they've been joined by Federico Valverde and Ronald Araujo and Darwin Nunez. So they're a pretty good team. And then Ghana, who are very strong too. You got Thomas Partey anchoring that midfield. So this is a fascinating group.
Yeah, I mean, so that Portugal-Ghana game to start off that group, that has 1-1, 0-0 written all over it. I still think that your Portugal team will find a way to get out. And then how about our old friends Ghana? I think they find a way to get out. But yeah, I mean, again, it's crazy.
And again, when mentioning all the talent in this group, you've also got Heung-min Son for South Korea. So some terrific players we're going to see. Can you clear the lane here a second for me to go on a classic Mosse rant?
You set it up like that. Hell yeah. Go.
When Ghana face Uruguay at this World Cup, invariably you will see lots of replays of that Luis Suarez handball from 2010, and it'll be in this tone as if Suarez did something wrong that day, and Ghana has reason to be mad at him. I find it mind-blowing that play is included in Luis Suarez's list of transgressions in his career. He did nothing wrong that day. It's the correct play. There's nothing unsportsman about it. There was no deception. And it paid off. So I've never had an issue with what he did that day. I don't know why it's viewed as remotely controversial, certainly compared to biting opposing players. I don't know why that play gets lumped in sometimes with the other stuff he's done throughout his career. Did you have an issue with a player in the last minute of the game when the other team is going to score the winning goal, just sticking his hand out and intentionally stopping it and saying, hey, it's no different than a basketball player dribbling down the lane at the end of the game to score a layup to beat you, and you foul him, put him on the line, make him make the free throws. He did the smart play there. He sacrificed himself. It was a trade-off, a red card for a penalty. Ghana missed the penalty. Uruguay ended up going through.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with it, but I don't have any issue with it being in his video history of things that he has done that have, infected the conscience of soccer out there. I mean, you will admit that when you foul, you are breaking the laws of the game, right?
Yes.
Okay. So he broke the laws of the game to gain an advantage, which happens constantly throughout a game. Yes. And yeah, I'm trying not to be a smartass, too much of a smartass, because there's varying levels and degrees of it. But I don't know why you're so blown away by something like that. I mean, if you're just looking for the most egregious thing, then obviously that's not going to be it. It's going to be the biting of an opponent. If you really,
it's just, and I know I'm South American, so there's a cultural thing at play here, but it's just this sportsmanship code that certain people ascribe to that I'm just not familiar with. Like, there are English people that get mad if a player asks the referee for an opposing player to get booked. Somehow that's a violation of the ethics of the game. And you should never, after getting fouled, you should never turn to a referee and gesture to him that the opposing player should get booked. Which is complete nonsense to me. You know, we've talked ad nauseum about the whole not celebrating when you score against a former team thing that we both think is ridiculous. So there's all these things. And
do you really think that is being characterized as beyond the pale by a segment of the soccer culture out there?
I think it's generally viewed as one of these. Of course, not on the same level as biting another human being, but it's generally viewed in his list of transgressions that have made him unlikable and such a polarizing, controversial figure. And that one, I think it's a total fallacy to lump that in with the other stuff. I had no issue with it.
It would be interesting had, just some Joe out there of a player had that player done it. I don't think it would live in infamy, if you will. It wouldn't be on that player's real necessarily. I think it's just because he's got a long catalog of incredible moments on the field that it just played into the villain, if you will, and all of the different notions that you may have and perceptions of him. And to your point, it kind of highlighted the different way that cultures see things in that moment. And there's a whole segment, like you said, that looks at it as beyond the pale, and not just a violation, but a violation of the spirit of the game, as opposed to others that look at it as completely acceptable and a skillful and smart decision at that moment, doing what is best for his team.
Portugal, Uruguay, by the way, is a rematch. Uruguay beat Portugal in the round of 16 4 years ago. I would go Portugal 1, Uruguay 2 in this group. I reserve the right, by the way, to change all these predictions. We're 7 months out from the tournament. I'm sure on the eve of the World Cup, we'll do this again.
Way too early predictions for all this kind of stuff.
But if Brazil win their group and Uruguay finish second, then we'd be looking at a South American showdown in the round of 16, Brazil, Uruguay. That would be interesting.
Love it. In general, look, anybody that has followed soccer long enough, you will have at some point been exposed to a FIFA production, which is what this was. And at times it blows your mind. The speeches and the aesthetic of it and the the productions and the music and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to reiterate that if I asked you, Mosse, to produce something for the world, that's difficult. I mean, we just talked about the different sensibilities that people have and the different ways cultures interpret things. And so doing something for the world, inevitably somebody is going to scratch their head or snicker or roll their eyes, or I guess even at times be irritated, because you can't be everything to everybody. And it was on full display during the Dross show. And I know, don't bore us, get to the chorus, but that's never going to happen in a FIFA situation like this. So eventually we got to what we all wanted, and we now have the matchups, and we can dissect this for the next 7 months and try to figure out what's going to happen. But it's difficult. It's always difficult. It should be. It's a World Cup, right? It should be competitive. It should be difficult to predict. And that this World Cup is so unique in terms of when it's happening in November, December of this year, as opposed to the summer, and obviously where it's happening in Qatar, then it should be unique in terms of the groups. And I think it is in the balance that we have. Anything more on the draw before we move on, Mosse?
Well, just one last thing. I know you reserve the right to change this, of course, but on our show, you were asked to pick your 3 favorites. And as of now, you have France, Germany, and Argentina, correct?
Yes, I think that. And so the France one is, we know what I said, obviously defending champs. The history is not kind to defending champions, but I think that France has only gotten better and stronger. They're not long in the tooth, and they just have talent for ages. And by the way, there's a possibility that the rosters could get expanded to 26 players. And that can change some things, especially when you're dealing with a country and culture that has so much talent like France, and maybe even to a certain extent, the US. I mean, we're talking about all this depth that we have. That means you're adding, usually it's 23 players. Back in my day, it was 22 players. Usually it's 23 players. You're adding 3 different spots there that, that could really, really help in terms of bringing along some of that depth. So that was France. Germany, they're too good not to rebound. And I think collectively as a country and as a national team, they will want to set things right after they bombed out of the group stage at the last World Cup. And then Argentina, for all of the reasons that you stated, Messi playing his best soccer internationally for Argentina, coming off of the Copa America, and just a lot more complete and composed, and I guess mature type of Argentina team, which isn't something that we always see. Let's be honest. I mean, hell, the shit show that was Argentina when Maradona was leading it's always feels like it's just this close to falling off the rails, and oftentimes it does fall off the rails. This one just feels like it's a lot more solid of a team.
Yeah, I mean, the overarching question hanging over this World Cup is you have a European country has won the last 4. All 4 semifinalists in 2018 were European. So can one of these big South American teams, and it would be either Brazil or Argentina, sort of end that drought of South American teams winning it? And I have a feeling they will. I think either Brazil or Argentina are going to win this World Cup. I just have a feeling that European dominance is going to finally come to an end here.
Interesting.
As far as Brazil, just quick thought on them. The most interesting development since the Copa America has been the emergence of these exciting attacking players like Rafinha and Antony and Vinicius, and even more recently, Martinelli. It's helped make the team less Neymar dependent, which I think is a good thing for Brazil and a good thing for Neymar potentially. Bruno Guimarães, another player emerging in the midfield that I'm excited about. So we could arrive at a World Cup. When we last saw Brazil on our air in the Copa America, we had this feeling of, man, it really is all about Neymar, and he has to create everything on this team. That's starting to change. So it'd be interesting to see how these players continue to develop and the way Brazil looks heading into the World Cup. But we could see a scenario where Neymar is sort of a piece to the puzzle and not have it be all revolve around him, which I think ultimately would be a good thing.
All right. Well, ultimately, we'll be talking a lot about this as we lead up and we get to know more of these teams, and we will introduce you to some of the teams that maybe you don't know a whole lot about, whether it's in our group or in the other groups. And this is wonderful. So I hope you enjoyed the draw. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, because there's all sorts of stuff that happened over the weekend as these players rushed back to wherever they're from, and got playing, whether it's Major League Soccer or around Europe. So don't go away. We're right back. All right, we're back. Let's take a real quick trip around Major League Soccer, which kicked back off this weekend. And there were all sorts of things that were going on when it came to Major League Soccer. Where do you want to start, Mosse? Up there in Portland?
Yeah, a little biased because it's the game we covered, and also we live here in Los Angeles. But to see the Galaxy go in there and beat Portland 3-1, 2 goals by Chicharito, when the day before LAFC had won 4-2 away to Orlando, it sets up this upcoming weekend on our air on Big Fox, the first El Trafico of the season, the Galaxy hosting LAFC. Very excited about it. I mentioned Chicharito going strong. Vela, too, looking healthy, playing well. Although it really hasn't been all about Vela. It's been more of a team effort with LAFC. 4 goals this week, and none of them scored by Carlos Vela. So I like that. I like that it's been more of a team effort, and they're not needing Vela to recapture fully that 2019 MVP form. So I like where both these teams are at right now. It's first against third in the Western Conference. I'm really excited for that matchup coming up. But your impressions on those two teams right now?
They're flying. Steve Cherundolo, everything he touches has turned to gold, and I'm happy for him. To your point, a healthy Carlos Vela, you don't need me or anybody else to tell you that is a good thing. And putting him on the field, and he consistently has an impact. I'm fingers crossed, knocking on wood, that both of those players are ready and available this weekend, because it hasn't always been the case. And you want those big games to have your marquee games, to have your marquee stars for everything. Just it makes it that much more interesting. The Galaxy game, and in particular Chicharito, look, he just keeps tapping on the shoulder of Tata Martino and El Tri, and it's not going to go away, the questions, because this is not a great El Tri team right now. They certainly could use a goal scorer, and who better than somebody who has already been there and done that? I don't think it's necessarily going to happen, but this story is going to be part of El Tri's story as we continue on. And I'm happy that Chicharito is scoring. I mean, that second goal that he scored, the first goal he scored was great. His ability to, as Bora would say, he would say, you need to smell. The ability for Chicharito to smell the opportunity in the box is awesome. It's awesome to behold. So the first goal, he finds a way to that back post and just gets his foot on it and puts it in. He just knows exactly where to be. And this LA Galaxy team is also starting to feed those balls into him and recognizing that if they just put it in a dangerous area consistently, good things are going to happen. His second goal, I actually think, was even more impressive, because there was plenty of markers, there was plenty of forest, if you will, in that area, and yet he finds just a couple of yards. And the quickness in the way that he was able to get his shot off and to release his shot, it was something to behold, because he's not always the smoothest and the most beautiful of strikers out there. And yet there was something just incredibly efficient in the way that he did that. Well-deserved from start to finish. This wasn't a smash and grab. Portland has to be looking around and saying, well, one, the Galaxy are good, and this is not the Galaxy that we remember from the last couple of years. And what's going on? Because Galaxy came into Portland, into that intimidating type of venue, and didn't miss a beat, and continued to create opportunities and to cause problems for the opposition when it came to Portland. By the way, that Orlando City LAFC game was crazy, back and forth in the rain and people sliding, and just from a neutral's perspective, it was fun to see. And then from a Galaxy perspective, or not from a Galaxy, from a MLS perspective, you got the LA Galaxy and you got LAFC flying right now. That's a good thing coming into El Trafico.
Listen, you and I have never been the biggest Chicharito fans. We poo-pooed that signing a little bit. And after year one, we were looking very smart. But let's be honest, since the beginning of last season, he has been sensational. If he had stayed healthy last year, he would have easily won the Golden Boot. He has 21 in 26 games since the start of last season. And yeah, the movement off the ball and the way he gets himself in these opportunities to score, and he's always in the perfect position to finish. He's never off balance. Yeah, I mean, it's just been a clinic in goal poaching. He's so good at that. So yeah, he is certainly silencing any doubters like myself. I would include myself in that category. So yeah, it's so great to see. As far as Mexico, listen, there is a disciplinary issue there. There was something that happened in 2019, which is what caused him to be banished in the first place. And then between COVID and him being injured, he was away for a while and was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And now Tata doesn't want to, it seems like, go back down that path. And he even got some backing from the federation president. But here's what I would say about that. Karim Benzema was banished from the France team for a non-football related reason, the whole thing with Valbuena. And then without any new information coming that would make anybody think significantly differently about that situation, he was welcomed back. So it just shows you that sometimes, time heals wounds. And when you're so good, ultimately a manager's job is to win games. And he might look at it and say, you know what, like from a self-serving perspective, like I got to bring so-and-so back into the fold. So we'll see if Mexico, we know they struggled offensively in the last few qualifiers. They're going to play some friendlies here between now and the World Cup. If they struggle offensively in those and Chicharito keeps going strong for the Galaxy, I get the reasons why he's been banished, but I want to see if Tata is going to be strong enough to hold to that all the way through to Qatar. It's going to be very, very interesting to follow that situation.
Yeah. I mean, look, if he's been banished, okay, fine. But how long does someone have to, serve their punishment or their penance? Maybe forever. I mean, it's the national team, and he's just going to stand on principle there. And look, they could have also you can move on from players. Doesn't mean they're not good players. The problem is that this is a player that scores goals, the most important and most difficult thing to do in our sport. And in the same way that, and he's an incredibly high profile player, in the same way that if you leave off Landon Donovan, which may in and of itself be the right decision for what you are creating out there, each and every time you don't win or you don't score or there is a problem out there, there is this living example that is now sitting on the outside that people are going to point to you and point to. So it's a difficult one, even for, a great manager like Tata, because are you betraying what you feel is right simply to have this player that can score goals? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But to your point, his job is to give himself, and in this case, the country of Mexico, the best possible chance of success. And if he determines that the best possible chance of success is without Chicharito, fine, fair enough. But if it doesn't work, and if you're not successful, then it's going to look that much worse for you that you had this guy sitting on the sidelines. What else, Mosse?
I mentioned LAFC are atop the West. Philadelphia beat Charlotte 2-0, so they're in first place in the East. This will be my weekly Jim Curtin, what a manager spiel here. I mean,
just keeps getting it done. Just keeps getting it done.
The Red Bulls, second in the East, they beat New England 1-0 over the weekend. So a good start to the season for them. And, you talk about the topsy-turvy nature of MLS. I know it's early, but you look at the standings, you have NYCFC in New England near the bottom in the East. You have Portland near the bottom in the West. Seattle got a nice win over Minnesota this weekend, so they moved up a couple spots, but still they're only in ninth. So yeah, I mean, some of the teams that we assumed would be the class of the league this season are off to sputtering starts.
A couple quick results, like you said. Toronto gets a win up there. A much needed win up there for Bob Bradley and company against NYCFC. Although there was controversy in that game with VAR, that the referee on the field in the moment called a penalty for Talis Magno, your Brazilian friend, right? Being taken down, and VAR evidently reviewed it and determined that he actually was not fouled and took it back. And yet, when you look back on the video, you see that there absolutely was contact, and that he was clipped, and that it should have stood. So much so that Pro came out and apologized and said a mistake was made. And evidently, what happened was the referee was not privy to the angle that ultimately came out when everybody saw. So this is a case where where VAR messed up a call and did the absolute opposite of its intended use. Now, it's an anomaly. It's an aberration. It's not going to make NYCFC folks feel any better. But, they also went on and didn't have a great game after that. But goals change games, and the opportunity to have a penalty in that moment was taken away in a situation where VAR actually got it wrong. And there's not a lot. There's very, very few times where we actually can say that. And Howard Webb and the pro referees out there, they raised their hand and they said, it's on us. We made a mistake. And the fact is that these are human beings, men and women, still with the technology that they are using. And when they make a mistake, they come out very, very publicly and acknowledge it and raise their hand. And in a certain sense, put themselves out there for the scorn and the ridicule and the criticism. They put out press releases, they put out videos, they put out apologies. Players don't always do that, or coaches don't always do that, but referees certainly do. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. They absolutely should, because this was not just a mistake. This was a big mistake, and it was a mistake by technology, which is the irony of it is that it's supposed to fix the mistakes that we make, and yet it made one here. Let's see what else. Montreal comes in and gets their first win against Cincinnati, and Cincinnati was playing very, very well. This is interesting for a couple of different reasons. One, it was a crazy, nutty game. It ended up being 4-3 for Montreal, but Jordi Mihailovic up there is playing really, really well. And when people start talking about what happens between a draw and a World Cup, sometimes there can be changes, and there can be people in the past. We've seen someone like Pablo Mastroianni, I think, who didn't play a part in World Cup qualifying, but ultimately made the World Cup team. Bruce Arena is famous for saying that had he qualified his team back in 2017 for the 2018 World Cup, he would have made some major changes, and there would have been some players that would have been involved, young and experienced, and maybe even some that had never even been with the national team going forward. Who knows if that's true or not? But when you're looking at someone like Mihailovic up there in Montreal, this could be a possibility going forward. But it's good for Montreal. It's good for the player, and it's good possibly for the national team going forward. Any other scores or moments from MLS you want to hit?
The last one we have to hit is Inter Miami lose to the Houston Dynamo 3-1. Inter have not led in a single game this season. Phil Neville, your thoughts?
I understand that life isn't fair and soccer isn't fair. I understand we all have opportunity and privilege. We're supposed to acknowledge it. This is a situation that has gotten beyond absurd. Okay. And I know that there are ramifications from the cheating that happened last year that this team is dealing with, but this is not good enough. This is not right. And anywhere, not just in the world, but pretty much anywhere, I think even in MLS, this would not be tolerated by a team on the level. Still, the way that we perch Inter Miami in terms of our expectations that they have, let's be honest, made for us over the years, you've got to make a change. You have to do something. Even if you think that he's a good coach, you have got to make a change, because this is not good enough. And the fans deserve better, and Major League Soccer deserves better. And I think he's a wonderful man. We've had conversations with him. He's put in at times, a difficult situation, but you got to figure out a way to get this team to perform. It's certainly not the best team by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not the worst team. And they are playing like the worst team in this league. And that's not good. It's not good, by the way, not just for Miami. It's also not good for Major League Soccer, because that's not something that you want. Miami sitting in 14th place, which is last place, with 1 point out of the season so far. Not good enough. And so look, they're big boys down there. Whether it's whether it's David Beckham or anybody else out there, they've been around. And at this point, it's just getting a little weird and comical of what's going on. That's not a good thing. Like I said, I want Miami to do well. The best thing is their pink jerseys. That's not good enough.
That's all I got for MLS. Should we transition to Europe?
Yeah. Let's transition around Europe because there was stuff going on there too.
This will be a shorter European weekend review than usual. I just want to hit on a few big points. First, in England, Liverpool and Manchester City both took care of business this weekend. Liverpool 2-0 winners at home over Watford. City won 2-0 away to Burnley. So City 1 point up. It sets up this incredible showdown we're going to have this upcoming weekend. Manchester City hosting Liverpool at the Etihad. I cannot wait. I mean, that's just going to be an incredible game. Meanwhile, in Spain, Barcelona beat Sevilla 1-0. Pedri with a phenomenal goal. We talked about him in the first segment. He's really emerging as really one of the best midfielders in the world right now. Barcelona have surged up to second, 12 points behind Real Madrid with a game in hand. If they win that game in hand, it would be 9. They were very salty over the officiating in the Celta Vigo Real Madrid game. Real Madrid awarded 3 penalties in that one. Benzema converted 2 out of the 3, and then Celta Vigo also had a goal ruled out. So Real Madrid ended up winning 2-1, but it was quite controversial. The last penalty Real Madrid were given was a complete joke, and they said VAR couldn't review it because there was contact on the play, which, I mean, you go back and look at that play, and if VAR can't overturn that, then I don't know what it's there for. La Liga might be replacing the Premier League as the league that does VAR the worst in Europe. Absolutely incredible incident this weekend. So that gap is probably a little too big, but the fact that we're even having this conversation is a testament to what an incredible job Xavi has done.
It is. And that they have become relevant again, and in such a way, that's great. That's great for his brand. That's great for the brand of Barcelona. And it bodes well for the future, which ultimately is where we're going to really think where this is going to come of age, if you will. So I love it. I think it's a bridge too far when it comes to this season. So that's done. And keep in mind, Real Madrid not only is going to win the league, but they're still in Champions League. So this still, when all is said and done from a season perspective, still could be Real Madrid's season. But man, oh man, Xavi deserves all the praise that he is getting because he's brought this team back from the brink, and so much so that now I think everybody's really excited, and rightfully so, about what's going to happen starting next year.
The big game in Italy, Inter won 1-0 away to Juventus. Calhanoglu with the only goal. I think this puts to rest any notions of Juve being in the title race. They're now going to start looking over their shoulder at Jose Mourinho's Roma in the battle for 4th place. The good news Juventus got recently is that Weston McKennie is way ahead of schedule. Sounds like he'll be back before the end of the season. He more or less confirmed that in an interview he did with us. And that Inter result keeps them in the mix. They'll be rooting against AC Milan today. We're taping this on a Monday morning. Milan play today against Bologna. So by the time you hear the podcast, that game will have happened. And so it's going to be really between Milan, Napoli, and Inter Milan for the Serie A title. Interesting weekend in the Bundesliga. So Bayern thumped Freiburg 4-1, and Dortmund got thumped by Leipzig 4-1. Christopher Nkunku, by the way, a goal and 2 assists. He's having an incredible season. When we talk about France and all the talent they have, he now has to be lumped into that. But interesting thing here is Bayern in their game against Freiburg, there was a snafu when they were making substitutions late, and the person held up the wrong number, miscommunication, yada, yada. Long story short, they had 12 players on the field for about 15 seconds there before somebody realized and a player ran off the field. And technically that means they could have to forfeit that match. So we'll see what happens there. And it's doubly important because the team that were playing, Freiburg, is battling Leipzig right now for 4th. So those points matter both ways. In fact, I would argue it matters more for Freiburg because even if Bayern have to forfeit this game, they're still going to win the league. So we'll see what happens with that situation. But have you ever seen that before?
It's a technicality. Is it cheating? It's cheating in terms of the laws. But like I said, it's a technicality. 15 seconds, you're gonna do it. And I know when it's Bayern Munich in particular, then you got to be on your best behavior if you're Bayern Munich, because people are going to be gunning for you and will take any opportunity to gain an advantage and to take you down in any possible way. But What are you going to do?
It's something we see in American football in this country a lot. Team getting caught with 12 men on the field when they make substitutions. It's always amusing to see these 300-pound defensive linemen trying to sprint off the field in time to not get called for that penalty. But it happens in soccer. Who knows?
If it had gained you any type of advantage, or if there was any inkling that it was done intentionally, then okay, look, I mean, if they're going to do that, that would be interesting. That would be very German.
And finally, Ligue, PSG smashed Lorient 5-1. Alexi, it took until April, but we finally got a PSG match in which all three of them scored. Neymar and Mbappe each had 2, and Messi had 1. Mbappe, by the way, assisted on all 3 goals. He didn't score, so he had an incredible game. And, in reflecting on this PSG season, I know they were ultimately going to be judged on what they did in the Champions League, but the fact that they went out to a team like Real Madrid in the knockout stage is disappointing. It's not shocking. If I told you that was going to happen at the beginning of the season, you'd believe it. What's been truly shocking about this PSG season to me is how utterly joyless it's been week to week. I thought there would have been a lot more games like this where they just flex their muscles and have a party against the riffraff in France. And yet it hasn't happened. It's been labored. And the fact that we had to wait until April for a game like this, when I thought this would be like every other week in the league, but we finally got it. And we finally got a little tantalizing glimpse of what that front three could have been this season had they clicked earlier, but it was not to be.
Is there a sadder league than Ligue? Oh my God, it's always, it's this and I mean, come on, man.
There was a Barcelona fan on Twitter that made an absolutely hilarious comment. PSG recently lost a game to Monaco, and he said, I feel like every other weekend I look up and PSG are dropping points, and yet when I check the standings, they're still 15 points ahead.
It's amazing. That is spot on. That is spot on. Oh, this is a problem. Oh, this is a problem. And then you look at the thing. So, oh my goodness. Just circling back to the Weston McKennie news. Obviously, with his injury, when we were talking to him on air, he, because I asked him, there's rumors coming out that you could be back before the end of the season. It was interesting to hear him, that we kind of look at as still young and immature, but to hear him talk about his injury and how, in a certain way, the psychology that was used upon him, where athletes will try to come back as quickly as they possibly can, sometimes to their detriment. It's just kind of that's how they're wired, right? And he readily admitted that he has the ability and wants to come back as quickly as possible. And so the timeline that was given was specifically given much further on than they necessarily anticipated. So it was a peek behind how he thinks of himself, I think, as an athlete. From our perspective, it's great because it would be great to have him healthy running around this summer. The U.S. is going to have games. Gregg Berhalter has talked about bringing in, the team, if you will, because there's only going to be so many opportunities that we get. Who knows if Weston McKennie and his foot will be healed enough to be able to do that. But being around this team, I think, is going to be important for Weston McKennie, and because obviously he is going to be incredibly important as we get into the World Cup. And so him having a good fall with Juventus is, I think would be huge for this U.S. team. And one more thing, the time that you are going to get from the moment that you play your last game, for many of these players that play in Europe, to the time that you're actually playing your World Cup, first World Cup game, can be a week. So again, the unique aspects of this World Cup are amazing. But it's good news from a Weston McKennie perspective. All right, Mosse, anything else?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there. You ask us your questions on the social media, questions, comments, or concerns, and you can always call us too on our voice box, our voice mailbox that we have on our podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. I think we have a bunch of Twitter questions this week. What do we got?
First up, at Not Brian Kamler asks, where do you rank the CONCACAF Champions League in terms of importance for MLS teams compared to MLS Cup, Supporter Shield, and US Open Cup? There are some on Twitter who think it's a complete waste of time.
I don't think it's a complete waste of time. I think that if I had to rank them in terms of the priorities, and it changes for different teams, but I still think no matter what, it's MLS Cup, then it is CONCACAF Champions League if you're in it, then it's the Shield, and then US Open Cup. I think there is this race to the moon that is going on right now with CONCACAF Champions League, in that you just want to be that first to do it in its current form and to check that box, not just for you, because you will forever get to be known as the first, but also for Major League Soccer. There are those out there, again, your hipsters out there that will talk about the Shield and everything like that. I think Bruce Arena and everybody else that's come before, I've show me someone that is excited and praising their Supporters Shield win, and I'll show you somebody that's bombed out in the MLS Cup playoffs. So it's still MLS Cup. That's where all the focus and the attention, that's where the history is. That's where you will be remembered most. But I do think that whatever team it is that ultimately wins CONCACAF Champions League, and we may see it this year, I think that will be a moment in history. Like the second team from an MLS perspective to win CONCACAF Champions League in its modern day form, nobody's going to remember that. It's not that it's not important, unless they parlay it into something big at a Club World Cup type of scenario. It's going to be, well, you weren't the first. You were the second. So I don't know. You agree?
I think that being the first to win CCL is going to be a really big deal for whoever does it. So one could argue that that's going to be a more significant achievement than, say, winning MLS Cup. I don't know. I could be wrong there. As you said, it depends on the franchise. But and by the way, that allows us to promote CCL this week. So we're at the semifinal stage. Tuesday, Pumas host Cruz Azul. Wednesday, Seattle hosts NYCFC. Both matches on FS1. We're excited. An all Mexican tie, an all MLS tie, which means the final is going to be Ligue MX versus MLS. It's just a matter of which matchup it ends up being. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, look, right now, we're guaranteed an MLS team in the final. And if I look between these two teams, we saw, by the way, Seattle win in MLS away, and Minnesota United's were unfortunate because they got a hold of Seattle when everybody started to get healthy. Rui Diaz back on the field, Lodero back on the field. If I look between Seattle and NYCFC, I think that Seattle has a better chance, and so therefore, on Wednesday, and then in the second leg, I guess from a MLS perspective of us giving us the best chance of winning an MLS team this year, I'd probably have to. I'd probably have to go for Seattle, and I do think that Seattle ultimately will be the team that goes to the final.
For what it's worth, I discussed the all-Mexican tie with Mariano Trujillo at the watch party we did for Mexico-US that night at O'Brien's Pub, and he thinks Cruz Azul all the way. He thinks they're going to win the whole thing. And yeah, I agree about Cruz Azul winning the semifinal. I think it'll be Cruz Azul against, I guess I lean Seattle. I don't know, but maybe that's just me reacting to this past weekend and they won and NYCFC lost. So to me, it feels like they're in a little better form and they got Lodero back and Rui Diaz and
we have two good teams in the semifinal. So that.
Yeah. So I'll go Cruz Azul Seattle final. Incidentally, we did try to get Ian Joy and Keith Costigan on today. They refused to come on with each other. That's how much the bad feeling is between those two. So next question. At Alex Goldstein 87, a good friend of ours, he asks, would you say the Copa Libertadores had more merit than the UEFA Champions League until the 1990s? Very quickly, just to address that, obviously, anytime you're comparing European and South American club football, up until the 90s, it was sort of a fair fight from a talent standpoint, and then Bosman and everything else. And
European community, all that kind of stuff.
Level of importing of players from South America to Europe has made it where now it's there's just no comparison. So sure. And prior to up until the 90s, you could argue from a quality standpoint, the two competitions were comparable. The one issue you have with the Libertadores, Tim Vickery has written about this. I know Argentinians bristle at this, but it's true. For a long time there, Brazilians didn't take the Libertadores that seriously. Santos in the mid-60s, when they were the dominant team in South America, decided to not contest the Libertadores, even in years in which they qualified, so they could instead tour the world and play in these lucrative friendlies because they had Pele, who was such a big draw. And so Tim Vicker has always argued that undermined any chance for the Copa Libertadores, which was still in his early years then, to become as big as the European Cup. Incidentally, those friendlies that Santos played have become one of the major flashpoints in this eternal debate over Pele's goal-scoring record, because Santos traveled the world, played in front of packed stadiums against top European clubs, scored loads of goals. And those goals now are completely dismissed because people look at it through a 2022 lens and think, well, club friendly, that doesn't count as a real game. While Brazilians argue that shows a lack of knowledge about the way things were in the 1960s. And those were very serious games, and scoring, a hat trick against Real Madrid should count for something, especially when, if Messi or Ronaldo scores a hat trick in an international friendly against San Marino, those count towards his club and country total. So it's that eternal debate that goes on to this day. But this question from Alex does allow us to talk about this edition of the UEFA Champions League, which the quarterfinals get underway this week. Tomorrow we've got Benfica hosting Liverpool. I'm on record as saying that that's a layup for Liverpool. They'll move on to the semis. But a tie I'm very interested to watch is Manchester City. They host Atletico Madrid on Tuesday. Atletico in good form. They won again this weekend. João Felix scored 2 more goals. He's been phenomenal. One of the best players in the world the last few weeks. Pep was asked a question in the press conference about whether he overthinks big Champions League games. He gave kind of a weird rambling answer. But so that storyline is always looming with him. I've said that I think City, gun to my head, they probably go through, but I think this is a dangerous tie for them. What do you think? Do you give Atletico a chance here?
No, they're going through. Man City's going through. Yeah.
One more note on Atletico. Luis Suarez has become something of a super sub for them. He doesn't start most games anymore, but they bring him on in the second half, and he's quite the weapon to throw on. And they came on this past weekend and scored 2 goals. So we'll see how that goes. City against Atletico. Then on Wednesday, Villarreal hosts Bayern, another one that I think is a layup for Bayern. And then the best matchup of the round, Chelsea, Real Madrid. Chelsea hosts the first leg on Wednesday. I didn't mention this when we were doing the Premier League review, but Chelsea got thumped at home by Brentford. Christian Eriksen scored again, just a great story. But Tuchel came afterwards and criticized the fans, said it was a terrible atmosphere. He hopes they're louder on Wednesday. Chelsea are going to be able to have a good amount of fans on Wednesday. They got whatever exemption they needed to get because of the Abramovich thing. There was some question about that, but so it's going to be a proper home leg. We'll see how they do. Christian Pulisic didn't play over the weekend. Presumably
they're saving Christian. They're
and
saving.
So Chelsea hosting Real Madrid on Wednesday. I cannot wait.
What do you got?
I have Chelsea moving on in this tie. I think it's going to be 3 English teams in the semifinals and Bayern Munich.
All right. Well, I'll take Real Madrid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luis Aguilar humoring me here. He threw in a line. Copa Libertadores kicks off on Tuesday. Any thoughts on this, Mosse? So I'll just give some big picture thoughts here. The Brazilian clubs have opened up this financial advantage, which is translated into a Brazilian team winning this the last 3 years. And in each of the last 2 years, it was an all Brazilian final. We also had an all Brazilian Copa Sudamericana final last year. That's the South American equivalent of the Europa League. So the big overarching question entering this year is, can anybody stop the Brazilians? I do think River are going to be very strong. Marcelo Gallardo sticking around for another year was obviously a great thing for them. We'll see if they can convince Man City to let him have Julian Alvarez for the entire year. Right now, he's slated to leave in the summer. River, by the way, have a real MLS flavor. You've got Ezequiel Barco there, Thomas Pochettino, Leandro Gonzalez Pirez. So MLS fans are taking pride out of the fact that these MLS rejects are now important contributing players for River Plate. From a Brazilian standpoint, you have Palmeiras, who are the 2-time defending champions, playing great, just hammered São Paulo over the weekend to win the São Paulo State Championship. Flamengo, interesting thing with them. They won it in 19, were runners-up in 21. They hired this Portuguese guy, Paulo Souza, as their new coach. And he was the coach of the Polish national team throughout most of qualifying, and then left right before the playoff to take charge of Flamengo. He felt like that was a better job. He said it's always been his dream to coach in Brazil. And everybody in Poland was completely taken aback by that. Are you serious? You're turning down a chance to go to the World Cup, potentially to coach a South American club, but that was the choice he made. And he's off to a catastrophic start with Flamengo, looking like he might get fired soon. So he's going to look like a complete idiot because Poland ended up qualifying for the World Cup. What do you think about that? A coach choosing a South American club job over a national team that was on the brink of qualifying for the World Cup.
Life moves pretty fast, my friend. Man, oh man,
that is quite the choice to make in your career. Sliding doors moment there. But Flamengo, despite that, if they get the right coach or they turn things around under this coach, still a lot of talent there, Gabigol and company. So yeah, I would say that the Brazilian teams to watch are Palmeiras, Atlético Mineiro, Flamengo, and then Corinthians have made some big signings and are hoping to emerge as a contender. They've got a lot of names you'd recognize: Renato Augusto, Paulinho, William, Roger Guedes. They've got Fagner. They've got Cassio in goal. 5 players, if you can believe this, they were on Brazil's 2018 World Cup squad and now currently on Corinthians, but they're all aging veterans. So we'll see how much they've left in the tank, but that's going to be a fascinating team to watch. So I would say it's those big 4. Unfortunately, the Libertadores, they used to always take pride in having more parity than the Champions League. That's really no longer the case. It's become kind of a closed shop as well. It's really River, Boca, and whoever the 3 or 4 best Brazilians are in any given year, which I would say are Flamengo, Palmeiras, Atlético Mineiro, and Corinthians this year. So you take those 4, lump them in with River and Boca, and it's going to be one of those 6 that's going to win it. So should be fun. Copa Libertadores group stage kicks off this week. We'll be watching. That
was a nice little bonus preview there. I like it.
And then this is all you. Last question. I know this is one of your pet topics. At NokerJ asks, what are your thoughts on the new NCAA soccer proposal?
So I think we've talked a little bit about this, and I was on a call last week, I think it was last week, maybe a little bit before that, with Sasho Shirovsky, the head coach at Maryland, who has kind of, along with others, been spearheading this. And, I've talked about it. So it's basically taking what has been the established norm for as long as I can remember, decades and decades and decades when it comes to college soccer, which has all been played in the fall, and splitting it into 2 seasons. It's not necessarily making more games. It's basically just spreading them out. So those midweek games, and therefore that midweek travel, 6 fewer matches in the fall, and then 4 additional matches in the spring. Postseason is moved, instead of November and December, which it traditionally has been, goes to May and June. As I said, reduction of those midweek games, maximum of 3 midweek games through the academic year versus 6 or 8 midweek games in 1 semester. And so this is a proposal that it doesn't radically change college soccer in terms of the amount of games that we talked about, but I think it just makes it better for the soccer development, and it makes it better for these student athletes. And that vote, it's coming up here, and it's happening either April 13th or April 14th of this year. And you need 33 of the 64 votes that are going to happen when it comes to conference commissioners and other votes and all sorts of stuff that is going to happen. I hope it happens, but as we said before, the NCAA is very, very difficult to move. In general, I am supportive. I am positive about this because this now, what now has become, unfortunately, this sleeping giant of an infrastructure, an existing infrastructure, needs to be awakened, needs to be tinkered, and needs to, I think, reemerge and provide that pathway again for those soccer players that maybe want to look at college as a potential pathway. And as we've said time and time again, it just keeps narrowing, especially when you're talking about the elite player out there. So I hope it gets done. I'm not 100% sure that it will. I think eventually it will. And if and when that happens, I just think that college soccer will once again be not as relevant as it has been in the past, but more relevant than it has been recently. And that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. More people and more pathways, more people playing soccer, more opportunities to play soccer, and more pathways for people develop in an already existing infrastructure that has, the facilities and the coaching and the history and the competition, all of that. How can that be a bad thing? So we'll see, because like a lot of things in life, it comes down to winning hearts and minds and winning votes. And we'll see if the folks that have worked so hard on this for a number of years have done enough to get those votes. Anything else, Mosse?
That is it.
All right, listen, we're going to take a real quick break. And when we come back, I'll give you my one for the road. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. It's the end of the show. And at the end of each show, I give you my one for the road. And I wanted to listen, we are nothing if not respondent to our people out there. Our State of the Union people out there, whether it's on the social media or in person or anything else out there. They have questions. They have opinions. They have pushback. You got anything, Mosse? I heard someone was bringing up an issue and had issue with the way that I had talked and a discussion from the past.
Yeah, I promised I would bring this up this week. Our good friend Grant Tuberville raised this issue on Twitter. This whole notion you've been parroting that if you're a U.S. fan and you don't like Gregg Berhalter, that inexorably means you're rooting against the U.S. national team. I'll just say from personal experience, Brazil had a coach from 2006 to 2010, Dunga, who I did not like. I did not like the way the team played under him. I was convinced they would be better off with somebody else. And so it did mean I was a little bit conflicted when they played. The reflexive patriotism kicks in and you're mostly rooting for the team. But I'm not going to lie, whenever they won, there was a small part of me that was annoyed that it would strengthen Dunga. And whenever they lost, there was a small part of me that was happy that it would maybe contribute to his ouster. So there was some confliction there, but I never got to the point where I was just rooting against my team. And some U.S. fans take an exception to your categorization of that. They feel like it's unfair to say that because you're an ardent critic of Gregg Berhalter, it means when the U.S. plays, you're rooting for the U.S. to fail. Would you want to revisit that? Do you clarify it or do you stand by it?
I stand by it 100%. And as a matter of fact, I think you just did a great job of laying out exactly the phenomenon that I am talking about. And again, I think if you are bristling at that, the reason why you are bristling at that is because it touches something and triggers something in you that you are embarrassed about. And I think you just talked about that sensation that you have, and it's okay. It's okay. It's human. So no, I'm not going to change either my wording or sure as hell not I'm going to apologize for having the opinion that I have. But I do want to clarify and maybe state again that in no way does that make me feel like that you are not a fan or that you're somehow a bad person for this. I think I'm just pointing out human nature. I think I'm just pointing out sports. And so when that piece of you that is watching this team be successful with someone at the helm that you feel is not appropriate, and that part of you says, this could contribute to the change that I am dying for, a loss or a failure of the team, I think it's perfectly okay for you to feel that way. Otherwise, it's just, we just keep winning and nothing ever changes. And therefore, when we get to that, then you were proven wrong anyway when it came to your assessment of the coach, because the team was ultimately successful. But again, I think it irritates people to hear that, to be called out in that way. And I put up my hand that I've been in that position before. And I was just, pointing out what I have learned over the years that I have been walking this planet in terms of how human beings behave. And I can confirm that I am also one of those human beings. And so I am right there with you. Anything, Mosse, before we go?
That is it. I hope that answer satisfied Grant.
No,
I imagine it won't.
It won't. Of course it won't. That's okay. But at least you got his name mentioned and we pronounced it correctly. And that's a good thing. I want to thank you, Mosse, because you shouldered the load today. For me, my voice was cracking when we came on air. It's since returned a little bit, but I appreciate all of the info as each and every week you do. You are incredibly illuminating and enlightening in terms of the things that you talk about. And I go away from each and every show having learned from you. And if and when you are asked to continue to provide the assessment when it comes to digital out there, I just hope that you have the courage to actually lend your name to something that has a ranking, an A, B, and C, a 1, 2, or 3, a good, bad, or ugly out there going forward, because that's really, my friend, where you become a brand. That's really where you are in the shoes of the work that we do out there.
You think Twitter has me shook a little bit. I'm afraid of the criticism, while you, on the other hand, have gotten to this point more than any other human being I've ever met who it just bounces off of you. And so you look in amusement at somebody that actually cares about the Twitter feedback they receive.
I do. I understand it to a certain extent, but my friend, it's going to be okay. All right. Guess what? There are people out there that don't like you. There are people that don't like you for a reason. There are people that don't like you for no reason at all. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing that you can do, nor should you do, to try to change their mind. They're either going to like you or they're not. I like you, my friend. And guess what? I got a feeling that there's a lot of people that do like you. And I got a feeling that there's a lot of people that maybe say they don't like you, but actually secretly do like you. And I can completely understand that, my friends.
By the way, there was a silver lining to this whole episode on Saturday. The young lady who was manning the Fox Soccer Twitter account is a former producer of this podcast. She left. I hadn't spoken to her in a long time. I called her on Saturday because I was afraid that me raising this whole stink might have gotten her in trouble, and which it didn't, thankfully. And we ended up having a lovely conversation. It was an excuse for us to catch up. And so it was great to hear from her. It was her departure, incidentally, that paved the way for Luis Aguilar to join this podcast. And as they say, the rest is history.
Well, I'm so glad that your insecurities were used and able to put you back in contact. That's a wonderful story, my friend. All right, listen, we'll be back again, same time, same place here. Thank you so much for downloading and reviewing and rating and doing all the different things that you do. We really, really appreciate it. We will be remote again probably next week. There's some construction going on in the studio that we have, but we make do. And even though I can't be in the same room and looking into those gorgeous eyes live, we still have a good time doing it. So thank you to everybody for hanging out. We'll see you again next week on the State of the Union. And until then, and as always, size the day.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.